There is no breeze tonight, no gulls cry, no sails crack, no lantern sways with the usual rhythm of ocean breath. Instead, the midnight sparrow sits heavy in the water, unmoving despite the currents that should carry her gently eastward. You know this not from the sky, hidden as it is behind a woolen wall of clouds, but from the quiet. Ships hum when they live. They creak, they sigh, they grumble, and they shift. But this night, she has gone still as if holding her breath or listening. And so you listen too. Below deck, deeper than your duties, should carry you past the sour mash barrels and the crates of chipped scrimshaw. You find yourself at the edge of the brig. It is not the official brig, the one where mutineers or drunkards get locked. No, this one was hastily nailed together, its slats still wet with pitch, tucked beside the ballast hold, like a forgotten box of rotten fruit. Yet even without the chains or proper guards, no one dares linger near it. No one but you. The cage is strange, not just in construction, but in aura. Built from scavenged wood bone and something else you can't quite name it, exudes a presence as if it resents being here. A strange, briny scent clings to it, not fish nor rot, but something older, saltier, like the wet breath of an ancient tomb, cracked open under the sea. Inside, wrapped in canvas, torn from a sail and bound at wrist and ankle with kelp rope damp, but never dripping, lies the prize of this voyage. The mermaid. She is not what the old charts drew, no dainty seashell breasts or playful tail swishing in moonlight. This creature is pale as sandless bone and nearly as still. Her long hair is black but dry, stiff like kelp exposed too long to sun. Her tail, if it can be called that, ends in fine, translucent fronds, more like the wings of a deep-sea creature than any fish. Her eyes are sealed shut, her gills barely visible, slits at the sides of her neck pulse once every few seconds. No one hears her sing. That's the truth of it, or so the crew believes. But you do. It started as a hum no louder than the creak of mooring rope. You thought it the ship herself at first, a loose plank perhaps, or the wind straining through some rusted hinge. But then you realized the sound had a shape, a pattern. Notes. It isn't a melody in any language you've known, none of the sailor shanties your mother once sang on wash day, nor the Moravian hymns that old Tobias bellows when drunk. This sound doesn't crawl in through your ears. It curls up your spine. It settles behind your teeth, and it only plays when you're near her. The first time it happened, you'd been sent below deck to retrieve more bait half-rotted meat sacks to lure whatever they think will come. Keep it moist, the bosun barked, and keep it bleeding. But you dropped your sack hook, bent to retrieve it, and there she was, not moving, not breathing as far as you could see. But the sound had risen like ink in water, curling into your skull, into your dreams. You said nothing, of course. Speak of the mermaid, and the officers would have you flogged for superstition, or worse, locked in that same cage when the tide turned. Yet your silence bought you something else. The crew stopped volunteering for the hold. They whispered of bad dreams, of salt blisters that burst like boils, of voices that whispered in sleep. You said nothing, and so the duty became yours. Let the boy do it, they muttered, eyes averted. The mermaid likes him. You're not a boy, really. More than that, less than a man. 16, maybe 17. You lost track of your name the day you signed aboard, and no one bothers to ask since. You are the bait handler. You tie the bloody knots. You hang the carcasses. You throw chum into the water and whisper prayers no priest ever wrote. Tonight the singing is louder. You crouch near the cage. Not close, not foolish, just within hearing, just close enough to feel the damp rise off her skin. just close enough to see that her eyes are no longer closed. They watch you, not blink, not twitch. They simply are. Dark, impossibly dark, without pupil or shine. As if you stare into the ocean trench itself, those chasms men fear more than hell. You freeze, hook still in hand. The song wraps itself tighter. It does not demand anything. It does not beg. It merely is, and somehow that is more terrifying than any scream. Why do you sing, you whisper? Your voice feels wrong here, too loud, too clumsy. She says nothing, but her eyes close, then open again. Blink once. Then she exhales. It is not breath that leaves her. It is sound, soft and round and sorrowful, like the moan of wood straining under centuries of sea. You realize your hands are trembling. Not from fear, no. From resonance. As though the song is tuning something inside you. Then clang a voice behind. You spin, startled. It's the quartermaster lantern in hand teeth black from chewing resin bark. Boy, get your arse back to your berth. Nothing good happens in the dark by that thing. You nod, obeying too quickly. Yet before you turn fully away, you see her again. This time her mouth is open, just slightly. No teeth, just shadow and a low pulsing note that rises as the lantern light recedes. The quartermaster mutters under his breath, spits near her cage, then climbs the ladder. The light disappears. You do not sleep that night. Your hammock sways above the ship's ribs, a spider's cradle rocking to the rhythm of unsteady thoughts. You try to hum to yourself old work songs, the rhythmic chants of the net pullers. But each tune warps in your throat, bends toward her melody. When sleep comes, it brings images. Her mouth whispering, not words, but shapes. Her eyes rimmed in salt. Your own hands untying something. Her shackles your own. Dawn is thick with fog, the kind sailors call whale's breath. It eats the horizon and blurs the masts. The crew is sullen slow. One man vomits over the side without even bothering to curse. Another refuses to leave his bunk, murmuring something about hearing his dead wife singing from the hull. You go below? You don't have to. No one sends you this time. Yet your feet carry you anyway, as if they remember a reason your head has forgotten. She is awake, not moving, still bound, but awake. The cage now drips with condensation, as if the very wood around her sweats in fear. You crouch again. This time her voice is different. It sings not to fill silence, but to reach. A melody with shape. A call. You lean forward despite yourself heart hammering. You cannot make out the words if they are words. But one feels like your name. Except it's not your name. Not exactly. It's the name you might have had you been born at sea. Had you been born hers, something wet touches your cheek. You flinch. It's only a drip from above, or so you tell yourself. You stand hook in hand and force yourself to turn away. But the melody follows you up the ladder, curling in your ears, long after the hatch seals her away. That evening, when the sun attempts and fails to pierce the fog, the ship drifts. No wind, no wave, just drift. A gull lands on the mainmast, looks you dead in the eye, and screeches something that sounds like a warning. Then it flies not away, but straight down into the sea. No splash. You say nothing. The captain says less. The crew eats without speaking, their mouths working but never tasting. And in the hold, the mermaid sings. Only you respond. Only you understand. Only you are listening. The salt sticks differently today. It clings not only to your skin, but to your thoughts, crusting over memories that once felt warmer, clearer, more human. You are not unaccustomed to the way a ship at sea slowly chews its crew bit by bit. A finger here, a dream there. But this voyage, this vessel, and this thing in the hold, they are not like the others. You wake before sunrise. though no bell rings, no orders given. You find yourself already dressed, hands raw from yesterday's line work palms, pink and flaking with the chafing of brine-soaked rope. Yet even as your body moves about its duties, your mind swims elsewhere. The bait today is thicker, some stew of ox tongue and piglet left in tarred barrels to ferment until it stings the eyes and numbs the fingertips. You are meant to sort it into smaller sacks, twist them tight with hemp cord, and ready them for deployment on the aft deck where the scent can trail behind the ship like a breadcrumb path for things that should not follow. But your fingers shake with a peculiar tremor. You realize after a few moments of work that the rhythm of your tying has unconsciously mimicked a pattern, a knot cadence matching the very tune you heard in the hold. You pause, staring at the loop you just made. It looks almost decorative, like a charm, like something meant to contain a song rather than secure bait. No one notices. No one wants to notice. Around you, the crew moves slower each day. Their conversations have dulled. What once was a constant hum of crude jokes, gambling shouts, and shouted orders has thinned into mutters and meaningful glances. And they're avoiding you now, not with hostility, but with something softer, more dangerous caution. The way men avoid a line under tension or a barrel marked with soot to signify gunpowder. You've become marked, not accused, not even condemned, but quietly, collectively excluded. You are the bait handler. You are also something else. This morning, the boatswain cord, with the tattooed eyelids and a voice like rope over stone, crosses himself before handing you the rusted bucket of flesh. He does not meet your eyes. He does not speak. He turns away before your shadow can touch his boots. That's when you first see it etched into the rail above the main deck behind where he stood. A sigil, charcoal black, drawn with the shaking hand of someone in a hurry or in pain, but clearly recognizable to you, though you've never seen it before. A spiral surrounded by teardrop-shaped lashes, like an eye weeping inward. A thing watching you from within you. You do not touch it. You do not need to. Somehow you understand it is meant to contain her. Or failing that, to identify those who've already been touched. You go below anyway. No one stops you. No one speaks. It's as though the ship itself has reached some silent agreement to let you do what no one else will, or can. The hold is darker than before. The lanterns along the walls seem dimmer, even freshly trimmed. The shadows have grown longer, not deeper, not blacker, just longer, stretched out like stains spilled from another world, spreading from her cage in quiet ripples. And yet there is no menace. Not exactly. The mermaid, though you still hesitate to call her that, has shifted. She no longer lies bundled. She sits now spine long and still, her frond-like tail tucked in coils around the base of the cage. Her arms so slender, you suspect you could wrap both hands around one and still have your fingers meet rest in her lap, unmoving. And her head is tilted slightly as if listening. Not to you, but through you. As if something far beyond either of you is singing, and only she can fully hear it. Only she is echoing it in tones so low, they feel less like sound and more like memory. You approach the bars slowly. You hear no words. You see no change in her expression. Yet something in you breaks. A vision comes, not a hallucination, not a dream, but a rupture in the fabric of now. For a moment, you are beneath the ship, not swimming, sinking, dragged not by weight, but by invitation. And around you, voices not hers alone, many layered male and female, old and newborn, all speaking the same impossible note. They tell you your name, not the one you were given, not the one the crew knows, but the name your bones remember from before the womb, before land. You stagger, Your palm strikes the cage. It burns not with heat, but with recognition. The wood recoils, or you do. You can't tell. Her eyes are open now, wide, black, and alive. You feel as if you're being unwrapped layer by layer until only your salt remains, and still she says nothing. Still the song continues. You leave only because you must. Your stomach betrays you. Your head swims too violently. Your legs carry you to the surgeon's bay, not of their own accord, but because that's the only place you might find something sharp or clean or real. You need an anchor. The surgeon, an ex-naval man with half a face and fingers like eels, watches as you collapse into a stool. He says nothing for a long time. Then he pours something green into a tin cup and shoves it into your hands. Drink, he mutters, before it eats the rest of you. You drink. It tastes like ash and lightning. He watches you longer. Then without invitation he speaks. First time they scream. Second time they see. Third time, they listen. Fourth, they never come back up. You meet his eyes. Or eye, rather. His left is a milky marble that doesn't follow your movements. You went down there. He doesn't nod, doesn't confirm. Just places a finger against the edge of a wooden crate beside his bench. Lifts the lid an inch. Just enough for you to see. Inside a jar. And in the jar, suspended like an embryo in brine, is a tiny shriveled ear, its skin pale blue, almost translucent. Gills twitch faintly at its base, though it is clearly no longer living. I took something from her kind, he says. Years ago, another ship, another cage. We were younger then, dumber, thought we could understand, thought we could own. He shuts the lid. They don't speak to many, only to the broken ones, the ones already cracked. You stand. Your hands shake, but not from fear, from proximity. You feel as though you are vibrating in tune with something that lives deeper than wood or steel or time. Don't go back down there, he says. You leave, but of course you return. Not that night, no. You try to resist. You lash yourself to duty, scrubbing the deck with extra fervor, repairing a torn sail in the half-light, volunteering for the crow's nest, even though your legs ache and your hands blister. You try to fill your body with anything other than the call, but it's no use. You dream. You dream of tides that whisper your name and bubble and foam, of fingers not hers, but many pressing lightly against your scalp, as if testing the shape of your thoughts, of mouths underwater, singing bubbles that rise to become truths. When you wake, your hands are wet, and worse, your mouth is open, as if you were singing back. The next morning you find symbols carved into your bunk rail. Not by you, you would remember. Wouldn't you? Spirals, eyes, tails with teeth. The rest of the crew avoids your gaze entirely now. You are marked. There are things no sailor speaks of unless drunk dying or staring into a sunrise he does not expect to see set. Some things are too soft for language, too old for scripture, and too dangerous for song. And yet those are the very things that seem to cling now to every surface of the midnight sparrow. In the damp ropes, the stained deck, the rusting harpoons lashed to the rails like trophies, too burdened to boast. It's as if the ship itself remembers something. No one told it. Something it learned when it began to carry her. Today you are ordered below with the cook's mate, Elbin, a lantern-jawed boy who speaks mostly in yawns and once carved a chess set from dried squid cartilage. You're told to retrieve a salted cask of goat meat from the rear hold far back past the ballast near her. You hesitate, only for a breath, only for the space between one heartbeat and the next. But Elbin notices. Thought you liked her, he mutters. You glance at him, trying to gauge his tone. It isn't mocking. It isn't cruel. It's curious, like someone asking why birds sometimes land on graves. She doesn't speak, you reply, trying to make your voice dismissive. Nothing to like. She sings, he says. That stops you. Your blood runs a little thinner. You grip the edge of the ladder rail tighter. She sings, he repeats. And this time, his voice is quieter, less sure. When I walk near the hatch, just for a second, then it stops. Soon as I get close, only lasts long enough to make you wonder if you imagined it. You don't answer. There's nothing safe to say. So instead, you descend the ladder first, carrying the coil hook over one shoulder, your boots landing on wood that feels too soft, too pliant, like it's remembering what it's like to rot. The hold smells of salt metal and memory. She is awake again, though she pretends not to be. Her head rests at an unnatural angle against the cage wall, gills fluttering slowly, lazily. But you see the slight tension in her fingers, the way her thumb curls inward in time with your footsteps. She knows you're here. She always knows. Elbin walks straight past, oblivious, or pretending to be. Smells worse today, he mutters. You follow, or start to, but your feet betray you. You stop, eyes locked on the cage. The air feels curved, as if sound is bending through it. You feel pressure in your ears, not pain exactly, but insistence, like someone pressing fingers gently against the side of your head, testing the firmness of your thoughts. She sings. This time there is rhythm, a pulse, not a melody, but something older, a structure, like waves against rock, like a heart that isn't yours. You lean forward. She opens her eyes. Elbin does not notice. He is too far ahead now, fiddling with a cask that refuses to roll free of its wedge. He curses soft and half-hearted. You don't respond. You kneel, not out of reverence or fear, but because your legs have given up on any other form of movement. The boards beneath you feel damp. You're no longer sure if the moisture is from the hold or from you. She blinks once, then again. Her lips part. Not in invitation, not in malice, simply part. From her mouth flows a sound like truth. That's the only word your mind offers, though you don't know what that means. It doesn't say anything specific, doesn't give commands or reveal secrets. It just is, and the moment you hear it, you realize it has always been there, always singing, always waiting for you. You don't realize you're crying until Elbin calls your name. He rounds the corner again, face pale, sweat already slicking his brow. What are you doing? You blink. Your hand is inside the cage, wrapped around the bar. Inside, touching it. You must have slipped it through the slats. The flesh of your palm is mottled red where it pressed against the brine-blackened wood. You snatch it back. I dropped my hook, you lie, your voice as dry as sand. Elbin's eyes shift toward the cage, then back to you. He says nothing, just shoves the cask forward with a grunt and climbs back toward the ladder. You follow, but not before glancing one last time. She is smiling, not wide, not human, but smiling. The next day, the fog doesn't lift. Not once. Not even when the sun should be directly overhead. The sky is a wet wool blanket pressing low against the masts, muting all color and sound. It swallows the gulls. It dampens the sails. It makes the midnight sparrow feel less like a ship and more like a tomb that hasn't yet realized it's sunk. Captain Dalford begins issuing orders by whisper. The crew obeys, but with a strange reverence, like acolytes performing rituals they've forgotten the purpose of. And you are not ordered below. You are not even spoken to. You are watched. They think you're listening to her. They're right. That night you dream again. But it's different now. This time you're not under the sea. You're inside the cage. She's outside it, watching, singing, Her voice calls out not to you, but to something above you, something descending. You feel its weight before you see it pressing down like a cathedral roof made of water and memory. You wake with salt in your mouth, not metaphor, not poetry, actual salt. Your gums sting. Your tongue is cracked. You cough and small flecks of brine speckle your shirt. That morning no one speaks to you, but someone has carved a spiral onto your food tin. You don't eat. Instead, you wait. When the fog thickens again in late afternoon, you descend the ladder alone. No pretense, no errand, no excuse. She is waiting, sitting upright, arms draped over her knees, hair falling like kelp in a slow current. Her eyes meet yours immediately. This time the song begins before you step into the light. It winds around your spine like a chain of flowers, sweet-smelling but barbed. You feel your memories shift, not disappear, reorganize, like someone reshuffling a deck of cards, not to cheat, but to understand your hand better than you do. You speak. Why me? It isn't a question you meant to ask aloud. It doesn't even sound like your voice, but it falls into the space between you like a pebble dropped into still water. She doesn't blink. She doesn't smile. But the song changes. And somehow the answer forms behind your eyes as if spoken, not in words, but in shape. Because you were never supposed to be here. Because your name is not what they call you. Because she knew your song before your mother ever heard your cry. You stumble back. Your boot catches on a rope coil, and you fall hard, slamming into the wall. Pain shoots up your back, but she does not move. She simply watches, singing. You flee. This time, you don't stop at the surgeon's quarters. You don't speak to anyone. You don't even look back. That night, the sea is perfectly flat. No waves, no swell. The hull barely creaks. The entire ship floats like a dead thing. A toy carved from driftwood and forgotten. And still she sings, only you hear. Time unspools differently aboard a ship like the midnight sparrow. Days don't pass so much as blur their edges, softened by repetition, their meaning lost beneath layers of muscle ache and seawater haze. But now, since her song began, since you began hearing it, that blur has twisted into something worse. It's not time that's fading anymore. It's memory. The difference is subtle, but unmistakable, like waking up in a familiar room, only to realize the furniture has been rearranged. You know the shape of things, but not how you know, not why you know. And more terrifying still, you begin to suspect it's not your mind doing the forgetting. You stand in the galley before a table. You don't remember setting your fingers, already red with juice from the sea apples you've somehow peeled. Elbin watches you warily from the doorway, his expression masked with forced indifference, like a man pretending he doesn't smell smoke in a wooden house. You all right? He asks after a long pause, though he doesn't move any closer. You've been humming. You stop, listen, he's right. The tune leaves your throat without thought. Like breath, like sweat. It isn't hers exactly, not the full shape of it, but it's built from her bones, a softened shadow of her melody, a child's tracing of a cathedral. You wipe your hands and walk past him without answering. You have no memory of how long you've been here anyway. Above deck, the fog is gone. In its place, a sky so brilliantly blue it hurts to look at directly. The sea lies glass still, reflecting the heavens so perfectly that for one jarring moment you feel the ship must be sailing between two skies. The sun hangs like a silent eye above, and every rope, every sail, every man casts a shadow too sharp, too long, as though the light has grown impatient with subtlety. The crew moves differently in the sun. They do not speak, do not meet each other's gaze. Many of them wear rags wrapped around their heads or black cloths across their eyes, not for the brightness you suspect, but because they've begun to see things where they shouldn't. where the sea's mirror breaks around the hull at the bow below the waterline faces have been glimpsed. Not clearly, not entirely, but enough. Enough to change a man's stride. You lean on the rail and look down. Just water. Just yourself. But the reflection tilts first, just slightly, just out of sync. Then it catches up, correcting itself, as if it had to remember what you were supposed to be. That night, you are summoned, not by voice, not by hand, but by something in your chest, a tug soft and rhythmic, like a rope being pulled gently by something far below. You descend the ladder slowly, lantern in hand, each footfall echoing more than it should. You expect to be alone. You are not. Cord stands at the far end of the hold, lantern raised. His eyelid tattoos look more like bruises in the flickering light. In one hand, he holds a long blade, not drawn, not raised, merely held the way a priest holds a sacrament before a storm. She's changing, he says. You don't answer. She used to look like a fish, he continues, when we first brought her in. Scales, fins, slits for eyes, like a hag's nightmare. But now, he looks at her. She looks like someone I lost. You look too. She is sitting up as always, but now her posture is regal spine, straight head, slightly inclined, not bowed but observing. Her skin has deepened in hue, no longer bone pale but kissed with something silvery, something radiant and dusky like starlight on wet stone. Her hair moves without wind. Her mouth does not open, but the song always, always the song continues. Cord speaks again, but this time not to you. You're done with him now, aren't you, he says. You frown confused. She's done with you, he repeats, more to the dark than to you. You've served, you've changed. She wants another voice. Cord. He moves forward slow and deliberate. He's not threatening. Not exactly. But his hand tightens on the blade. She talked to me last night, he says, eyes unblinking. Not in words, but I felt it. In my ribs, like thunder in a cave. She called me her second. You shake your head. Not in disbelief. There is no disbelief left aboard this ship, but in sorrow. Because he doesn't understand. You don't think he can understand. She doesn't choose you, whisper. She waits, that's all. He stops, and the moment holds. The song changes. It surges, still wordless, still melodic, but filled now with something new. A note like iron, like decision. Cord stumbles backward, then clutches his head. You watch as blood seeps from his nose, from his ears, thin lines tracing the edges of his jaw. He drops the blade. It clangs but doesn't echo. His knees buckle. He gasps, tries to say something, but no sound comes out. Then he falls. The lantern tumbles from his grip, snuffs out as it hits the floor. You are alone with her again. The darkness is not complete. Some glow remains from her. From the walls, you're not sure, but enough to see that she has moved. Closer to the bars. Her fingers rest on the wood. Her eyes are wide, and this time she speaks, not aloud, inside you. Her voice does not arrive through your ears. It bypasses your body entirely, slides through your marrow like warm oil. You feel it. He would have ruined you. You swallow. Who are you? I am memory returned. The words are not words. They are knowledge pressed into you like an imprint into wax. I sang your shape before your mother formed her womb. You fall to your knees, not from fear, not anymore, from understanding. She is not a siren. She is not a creature. She is a threshold, and you are already through. Later, how much later, you'll never know. You rise. Cord's body is gone. Or perhaps was never there. You remember it, but only as you might remember a dream. You're sure was never yours to begin with. You ascend the ladder. The deck is empty. No helmsman, no captain, no crew. The sails hang full, though there's no wind. The wheel turns slowly on its own, spinning ever so slightly to one side, then back. You walk the length of the deck. Every bunk is abandoned. every corner clean, as though the ship has shed them all like a crustacean molting its shell. Only your hammock remains, inside it your old clothes, but you are no longer the boy who wore them. You turn and face the hold. You know where you belong now. You descend again slowly, calmly. She is waiting. She does not smile. She sings, and for the first time you hum in harmony. There is no longer a clear distinction between what happens in waking and what arrives in dream. Since that last night, since the deck was silent and the crew had vanished like breath in winter, you find yourself moving through the midnight Sparrow as one might drift through a flooded cathedral, reverent, suspended, strangely buoyant, and not entirely convinced the water is real. Perhaps it is. Perhaps this ship was never meant to sail upon the surface of the world at all. Perhaps it has always glided just beneath it, somewhere between memory and myth, drawn forward not by wind nor sail, but by the weight of her song and the pull of your listening. There are no clocks aboard, no bells rung. You mark time only by the rhythm of her voice, now sometimes faint, distant, lost in the rustle of your own thoughts, sometimes rising with clarity and force like a lantern flaring in fog. And with each note, something else becomes evident, not just strange, not simply mysterious, but true, a kind of truth older than scripture and colder than reason. You learn quickly that the ship still moves. Though you do not touch the wheel, and though no hands haul the rigging, the sails shift, subtly catching breezes you cannot feel. The compass spins listlessly, but the direction is never in doubt. You are being taken somewhere, though whether the destination is a place on any known map or simply a moment yet to arrive is unclear. You have ceased trying to define the difference. Below deck, her cage no longer feels like a prison. It has changed, grown. You do not recall anyone replacing the slats or recaulking the joints, but the bars have softened, become less like a cage, and more like the ribs of some massive organic chamber. Inside, she moves freely now, or seems to. The space obeys her. Walls pulse when she sighs. Lanterns dim or glow in tune with her song. The air around her is perpetually damp and warm, like the breath of something vast. You sit with her often, not to speak. There are no more questions. What remains between you is not conversation, but communion. You sit and she sings, and through her voice you receive impressions, memories, sensations, fragments of lives that may never have been yours, and yet pulse within you like inherited dreams. You see, for instance, a coastline carved from coral and pearl laced with towers that spiral like shells. You taste a fruit that bleeds silver. You feel the weight of chains, not on your own wrists, but theirs, the ones who hunted her kind, believing they could silence a song by shackling the throat that carried it. She gives you these things not as gifts, but as inheritance. They belong to you now because you have listened, because you have answered. One evening, though you can no longer define evening by the angle of the sun, since the sky remains locked in a twilight, neither rising nor falling, you find yourself tracing a pattern on the deck above her hold. It is not a pattern you remember learning yet. Your hand knows it well. A spiral like a whirlpool surrounded by crescents and jagged edges, like a mouth with too many teeth. You use pitch melted and cooled, scooped from a barrel no longer marked on any manifest. When you finish, the pattern hums, quietly, in time with her song, and you feel something answer not from below, but from beneath, deeper. The ship changes course. Not physically, there is no lurch, no swing of mast, but in essence, as though a great wheel has turned below the sea, altering the tide's intention. And you, standing barefoot in the middle of that painted spiral, feel your heartbeat align with something older than tides. That night you do not sleep, not because of fear, because sleep feels irrelevant now. Your body rests when it must. Your mind wanders when permitted. But you are always aware, always tethered to her, even when apart. And in this heightened state, you begin to see things others might have missed. You notice, for instance, the subtle flickering shadows that move not in opposition to flame but in harmony with her breath. You observe how the rust on certain bolts takes the shape of glyphs letters from no known alphabet, but ones you can nearly pronounce when your tongue is stilled. One morning, again, only morning by assumption, you discover a change in your reflection, not at first. You bend over a bucket of water, preparing to rinse your hands, and you catch your face as usual. But then you blink. Once. And in that split second, you see not your own eyes, but hers. Black, unfathomable, ancient. You jolt backward. The bucket tips. Water spills, but something inside you remains unchanged. You try to speak aloud, just once, just to hear your voice in your own ears. But the sound comes out wrong. Not in pitch or timbre, but in shape. Your words form bubbles in your throat, as if your voice now carries too much pressure, as if it no longer belongs in air. You spend hours in silence. The next time you descend, she greets you differently. She touches the bars one finger only, presses it against your chest, right where your sternum lies. You feel a note pulse through your ribcage. Not sound, vibration. Like a bow drawn across a deep string inside your body, and you understand something impossible. You are becoming an instrument, a vessel, not of her voice alone, but of the choir she sings for. The many who once sang through the deep, who once lured ships not out of malice, but out of necessity, out of warning. They did not lure sailors to their deaths. They called them home, and now that call has returned. The next change is physical. Your skin grows more sensitive to salt, not irritated, responsive. When you dip your hands into brine, the skin darkens faintly, taking on a sheen like polished stone. Your hair begins to mat differently, clinging to itself, as if seeking shape. Your tongue becomes acutely aware of moisture in the air. You can taste storms 3 hours before the sky darkens. You no longer eat, not because of lack, because food feels pointless. You are nourished now by song, by nearness, by belonging. Eventually, even the boundaries of the ship begin to blur. You walk its decks with barefoot ease, feeling the grain of the wood as if it breathes with you. Sometimes in the corners of your vision, you glimpse the crew, not as they were, but as echoes, pale outlines, shadows with familiar shapes, laughing, arguing, crying, gone, but not absent. They have faded into the timbers, become part of the vessel's memory. Their stories linger in knots and nail holes. You begin to speak again, but not aloud, with her, in thoughts. You trade impressions, images, scents, emotions. She shares visions of the trench where her kind sleep curled like unborn stars in warm currents. You send her memories of rain on canvas of your mother's hands of the first time you saw fireflies. She sings the shape of her name into your bones. Not a sound, but a feeling, one that opens like a flower behind your sternum. Every time you hear her breathe, and you know now that you are no longer waiting. You are preparing. The ship begins to tilt, not physically, but directionally, as if gravity itself has been drawn forward. You spend less time above deck, more and more within the hold. It no longer smells of damp and decay. It smells like home, like salt and heartbeat. Like you sit with her. She places her hands on either side of your face. You do not flinch. You do not blink. And when her song rises, you join it not with voice, but with presence. You harmonize in vibration and spirit and memory. And when she speaks, truly speaks, you understand every syllable. We are close. Close to what? But you already know. The water has grown still again. Not dead. Expectant. Like the moment before thunder. She stands. Not fully. Not upright. but taller than before. She reaches through the bars. They do not resist. Her hand rests against your shoulder, and suddenly the ship shifts. This time you feel it. Not a jolt, not a storm. A sinking. Gentle, slow, but unmistakable. You do not panic. You do not move. You only listen. And somewhere far below, a second voice rises. Not hers, but kin. Calling, answering, completing. At first you assume it's an illusion, a trick of ballast and brain, of creaking wood and swaying thought. But the sensation deepens with every breath you take. The midnight sparrow is descending. Not plunging, not sinking in ruin or distress, but submerging slowly with an eerie grace, like a whale diving with intention into darker waters. The shift is nearly imperceptible at first, a soft tilt of the deck, a new weight behind your steps, a tightening in your chest where air begins to taste slightly. Thicker. The lanterns burn the same. The walls don't drip. But the sound changes. All ships speak. They groan under strain. They mutter through their masts. They creak with protest when burdened. But this sound is not protest. This is a sigh. A low, resonant sigh vibrating up from the keel through the ribs into every nail, every fiber of timber, and into your bones. It is the sound of surrender. Not in despair, but in reunion. The ship is not dying. It is returning. You rise from the floor of the hold, slowly, no longer startled by her touch, no longer afraid of the fact that you now move as if mimicking her breath. You're aware distantly of the way your heartbeat slows as you ascend the ladder, each beat separated by a fraction longer than it should be. Each inhale pulling something heavier than air into your lungs. Your eyes adjust more quickly now, even in near total dark. The darkness welcomes you. Above deck, the world is still. Sky and sea have become identical gray-blue, rippled not with wave, but with movement beneath. You lean over the rail and do not search for land or stars. Instead, you peer into the water, knowing now that it no longer reflects the world above. The surface has turned to glass again, but warped as if you are not looking into water, but through it into layers. Strata, depths of time and memory stacked like pages. And something is watching back. You don't flinch. You don't need to. The shape is massive, stretching far beneath the hull, indistinct, in the way shadows are indistinct when they are too close. It has no eyes, or perhaps it has only eyes all along its flank, like barnacles made of gaze. It does not move, but you know instinctively, unshakably, that it is waiting. Not for you. With you. Because this has happened before. You are not the first, and you will not be the last. Behind you the deck creaks. You turn. Elben stands there, or something that was once Elben. He is thinner than he should be. His skin too smooth, almost translucent where the moonlight, or is it moonlight, touches him. His eyes are glassy, reflecting too much light. But his smile is kind and tired. I thought you'd be farther by now, he says, voice thick, like it's been soaked in seawater and left to dry in the hold. She likes you more than she liked me. You want to speak, but you can't. Not because of fear, there is no fear now, but because words feel fragile, inadequate, like paper boats on an endless ocean. Elben walks to the edge of the deck and peers over. She used to sing me names, he says. Not mine, others. Names I'd never heard before. Names I remembered. You stand beside him. Together you watch the water. She doesn't kill them, you know, he murmurs. The ones before us. She brings them home. That's all. Back where they belong. Back where the song started. You nod, and then slowly he begins to dissolve. Not violently, not painfully. Just dissipates, as if the air around him remembered something truer than flesh. His skin begins to shimmer, breaks apart into flecks of salt, and light drifting upward on a wind that doesn't blow. Within moments, He is gone, but not absent. You feel him in your shoulders, in your breath, in the pressure that now lives in your bones, and you understand he has joined the choir. Below, the cage is gone, or rather, it has ceased to exist as a cage. The slats have softened, fallen, melted, become part of the hull, or perhaps always were. She sits in the open now, no longer bound, no longer contained. Her form is brighter than before, but not with light, with memory. She glows like a thought that has finally returned after centuries lost. She looks at you and speaks. You've heard it long enough, she says. Her voice is air and water and grief and heat all threaded together. It does not enter your ears. It arrives like a dream you never had but always missed. The others still wander, she says. Some have forgotten, others still refuse. But you, she lifts a hand. In it is a shard not of metal or glass, but something organic grown shaped over centuries by current and longing. It hums softly. When she places it in your palm, it bonds immediately, warms to your skin, then merges with it, sinking into your flesh like rain into dry soil. You carry their names now, she says. You will remember them. And suddenly you do. Not just faces, but songs, voices, chants in languages you don't know, but understand completely. Prayers sung from the bellies of ships, lullabies hummed into waterlogged coffins, battle cries swallowed by deep trenches. You remember all of them, because they are yours now. And the ship tilts again, not in panic, in reverence. You walk to the center of the hold. You place your hand on the floor. It is warm, it pulses, and from that point, the ship begins to open. Not like a wound, like a mouth. The boards spread, stretch, and part, not into splinters, but into soft, fibrous tendrils that bloom outward like petals. Beneath, the sea waits, not rushing, not roaring, simply waiting. You climb through. You are not alone. Others are there, shapes, spirits, echoes. Some have names. Some are names. They form a circle around her as she rises through the opening, not stepping or floating, but emerging as though she is not leaving the ship, but shedding it, like a chrysalis. And you follow, down, into the sea that is not sea, into the deep that remembers. You do not drown. There is no need. You breathe differently now. You move differently. You are different. And as the waters close above, and the ship begins to fade from thought, you feel the pull of others. Not just her, not just Elbin, but an entire ocean of memory. And from their depths, they rise. Their voices join hers, and yours joins them. At last, the silence of the deep is broken, and it is beautiful. You do not know how long you have been beneath the surface, because here time behaves differently. It does not pass. It swells. It breathes. Down here, you are not pulled forward by clocks or sunrises, but gently turned in the current of memory. It does not matter what day it is. What matters is where you are, and even more than that, what you have become. You are no longer aboard the Midnight Sparrow. In fact, you are no longer entirely sure whether she still exists. Was she ever a vessel in the ordinary sense, a ship of timber and tar, with a hull and a name and a destination? Or was she something else, entirely a cocoon of wood and grief, built to carry you here to this forgotten corridor, beneath the world where the bones of sunken gods lie tangled with shipwrecks no chart has ever marked? You remember the descent. You remember the sea folding over you, not like a closing door, but like the arms of someone who never stopped waiting. It was not cold, not stinging. The water welcomed you, embraced you. It pressed against your skin, not to drown you, but to know you, reading every scar, every nerve, every buried name. You did not struggle. You did not need to. Your lungs accepted the change. Slowly, carefully. as though they remembered a way of breathing older than air. And now here you are beneath, not swimming, not walking. You move with a kind of buoyant grace, your body no longer subject to weight or resistance in the way it once was. You pass between structures not made by men, columns of bone and coral, overgrown arches of wrecked figureheads, weeping statues whose faces have eroded into suggestion. The light here comes from no single source. It pulses in the walls. It drips from the ceilings. It listens. You do not ask where you are. The answer is already inside you. This is the cathedral below. The name arrives in your mind not through thought, but through recognition. A place spoken of only in myths, then forgotten even by the myths themselves. A sanctuary for those who heard the song and followed it. Not sirens, not monsters. Remnants, keepers, refugees of the great unraveling that scattered their kind across oceans and centuries. They are here. You begin to see them, not clearly at first, just shapes flitting at the edge of your vision, long fingers trailing through kelp eyes like coals behind shifting curtains of sea. Some still bear the forms humans once gave them, tails, scales, delicate hands. Others are far older, their shapes fluid, changeable, held together more by intent than by bone. They do not speak, but they gather. And when they pass near you, feel known. She walks beside you, or drifts, or moves in a way that makes the term beside irrelevant. She is not bound to a single direction. Her presence surrounds you, threads through you. She has grown larger now, not in form, but in magnitude, as though by entering her realm, you have peeled away the limitations you once placed on her. Here she is entire. You pass beneath a vast arch, carved from what appears to be whale spine, and engraved with markings you almost recognize. At its peak, a bell hangs upside down. It does not chime. It resonates faintly, constantly, like the low hum of the sea's dreaming. Beyond the arch lies the heart of the cathedral. It is not a room. It is a space, spherical, infinite, enclosed yet borderless. Columns rise from the abyss and vanish into shadow. In the center floats a stone, yes, a stone, though it glows with the warmth of memory, the way a hearth does even after the fire is gone. Around it the keepers gather. They are not many, a dozen perhaps, or more. It's hard to tell where one ends and the next begins. Some shimmer with outlines of human sorrow. Others bear the scars of ships that tried to silence them, nets that still trail from their limbs, hooks lodged in translucent skin sails tangled in their hair like forgotten shrouds. But all of them are singing, not with mouths, with being. Their song surrounds the stone threads through the walls, drips into the current. And as you step forward, the song changes, makes room for you, expands, reshapes itself around your presence, like a sea anemone adapting to a new tide. You do not hesitate. You kneel before the stone, and the stone answers. Images fill your vision, not just of ocean, not just of death or beauty or memory, but of history, of purpose. You see the first time one of them was captured, brought in chains to a castle, long since consumed by the sea. You see the priest who tried to exorcise her voice and lost his own in the attempt. You see a fisherman centuries later who freed a half-drowned creature from a net and never again touched land. You see ships turned inward, swallowed not by storms, but by regret. You see that this song has always existed. It is not a lure, it is a call to remember what was broken, what was buried, what was cast away in the name of silence and safety. And now you are part of it, not just as a vessel, as a keeper. The realization does not strike you like a bolt. It unfolds like seaweed uncoiling in still water. You do not flinch. You do not celebrate. You simply accept, Because deep down, you've always known this role was waiting for you. That your voice was meant not to shout orders or cry out in pain or sing silly songs to pass the time, but to join. You rise. Around you, the others pulse in approval. She places a hand on your chest again. You remember when this gesture was alien frightening. Now it is home. She speaks not to you alone, but through you. There is still much to carry. You nod. There are others who have forgotten. You understand. We will go to them. And in that moment, the water around you shifts. Not with force, not with violence, but with intention. The cathedral recedes, not because you leave it, but because it no longer needs to contain you. It has passed through you. It is you now, and the current begins to move. You move with it, back toward the surface, but not as you were. You are not rising as a man. You are rising as a note, a vibration, a memory wrapped in skin and story. And somewhere far above, someone sleeps in a hammock aboard a ship they think is haunted, and they dream of singing, and the sea begins to hum. It begins slowly, the ascent, not with the jolt or lurch one might expect from breaching a realm so deeply submerged, but with a kind of aching inevitability, like the tide returning to shore after centuries of holding its breath. You feel no rush, no acceleration of movement, no pull of gravity inverted. Instead, the sensation is that of being gently exhaled by something ancient and sentient, like a breath released by a slumbering god, whose dreams you have just been invited to witness. The water around you remains calm, but with every second that passes, it grows less dense with memory, less saturated with the layered histories that drift like sediment in the cathedral below. You are moving upward, yes, but more than that, you are being returned not simply to the surface, but to the forgotten edges of the waking world. Your body no longer resists this shift. It has already learned how to breathe water, how to carry song in its marrow, how to bear memory in its pulse. You feel neither hunger nor fatigue, only a kind of electric awareness humming behind your eyes in the hollows of your ribs and deep within your palms. The shard she gave you, that living memory stone, still rests beneath the skin of your chest, like an ember waiting to spark. You can feel it now synchronizing with a beat that is not yours alone, but belongs to a chorus greater than yourself. A rhythm ancient enough to have shaped the shoreline and taught the coral how to dream. As you rise, you become aware that you are not alone. Around you, others rise as well, some human-shaped, others blurred at the edges, their forms obscured by long strands of history and salt. You recognize them not by face, but by feeling as one might recognize a lullaby hummed in childhood after decades of silence. Some are old, so old that their shapes seem almost mythic, bearing the aesthetic of cave carvings or tide-washed idols long buried in coastal sand. Others are recent new keepers like yourself, recently awakened, still shedding the skin of their former lives like molted scales. They do not speak in words, for there is no need. Instead, they drift beside you with solemn grace, their presence an affirmation that this journey is not solitary, that you are part of a migration older than nations, older than war, older than the very languages that tried to name them. One passes close, and you catch the glint of a necklace made from coins no longer minted, its chain of kelp, wrapped lovingly around a neck etched with runes. Another carries a lantern whose light flickers, not from flame, but from the bioluminescent echo of captured wishes, glowing blue-green in defiance of the dark. All of them, these fellow travelers, are tethered to the same purpose, to bring the song back. Eventually, the water begins to change. It grows brighter, not suddenly, but with that slow bloom of pale light that precedes dawn. You feel it more than see it at first, a thinning of the shadows, a loosening of the heavy silence that once embraced you so completely. The pressure begins to lift, though not in discomfort. It is more like emerging from beneath a heavy quilt on a cool morning, your skin tingling in response to the gentler air. The water becomes less resonant, less thick with echo and story. You are nearing the veil, the threshold, the surface, and then without ripple or splash you cross it. But it is not the ocean's surface that greets you, not in the way you expected. You are not expelled into waves or flung skyward in a spray of salt. Instead, you emerge into stillness. The surface you breach is smooth mirror-like, with no horizon in sight, just an endless plain of water stretching in all directions, reflecting a sky more silver than blue, a canvas without sun or moon or star. It is not a sea you recognize, nor a sky you've sailed beneath before. It is a memory of a sea, a metaphor made liquid, a dreamscape assembled from the minds of those who once listened to the deep and dared to answer it. You float there weightless, suspended between water and air, uncertain now of which is which. There is no wind yet, your hair moves as though stirred by a breath. There is no sound yet. The song continues, not sung aloud, but carried on the inner tide that now pulses through your every cell. You are awake, yes, but more than that, you are attuned. The others breach too, one by one, each joining you in the still water, without disturbing its surface. Together, you form a circle, an unbroken ring of silence and intent. You know what must come next, not because it has been told to you, but because it now exists within you as an unshakable truth. The time has come to carry the song outward. She rises last, not slowly, not dramatically. She simply appears not from beneath, but from within, like a ripple made whole. Her form is even more radiant now, shimmering with the reflections of every keeper she has ever known. Her eyes are deeper than the trenches, her hair a constellation of strands that catch the invisible currents of this place and refract them into color. When she opens her mouth, no sound comes out. Yet you hear it clearly. There are cracks in the world, she says, not with voice, but with presence. Cracks where memory leaks. Cracks where the sea sings alone. You feel them, these cracks. Places where the surface world has forgotten. The old stories has paved over the shrines, has drained the sacred coves to build ports and prisons. Places where the voices of the deep are dismissed as madness, or worse, as marketing. The song has become fractured, co-opted by sea shanties, and sanitized myth severed from the truth of its origins. She turns to you. To heal the world, she says you must sing into its wounds, and suddenly, your purpose crystallizes. You are not a savior. You are not a weapon. You are a resonance, a carrier of the ancient frequency that once unified sky and sea. The song must be heard again, not shouted, but whispered, not preached, but remembered. One by one, the keepers begin to fall away from the circle, not descending, not vanishing, but fading, dissolving gently into the air, into the water, into the folds of space where meaning waits. You watch as they travel, not across distance, but across story. Each reappears in a place you half remember, a salt marsh behind a broken fence, a cave whose floor is littered with crushed shells, a dock where a child once dropped a message in a bottle and forgot what it said. And then it is your turn. You feel your outline soften, your shape blur not into death, but into potential. You are no longer bound to form or flesh. You are becoming song. You choose your point of return. It is not the deck of the Midnight Sparrow. That chapter is closed, sealed into the ribcage of the sea where only the oldest voices dwell. No, you choose a quieter place, a small coastal town whose lighthouse has long gone dark. You remember it only faintly from a dream you might have had during a fever. The shoreline there is sharp with shale and memory. A chapel long abandoned sits atop a cliff, its stained glass windows shattered by storms decades ago. Below it, a tide pool reflects a sky that never quite clears. You arrive not as yourself, not entirely, but as a presence carried on the wind. A boy finds you first, not in body, but in song. He sits on the edge of the pool humming to himself, unaware that his melody now harmonizes with yours. He does not know the language. He does not need to. The sea listens, and in that moment, a crack in the world begins to seal. The water stirs, the air holds its breath, and far below in the trenches of silence, something stirs, not to rise, but to listen. You have returned, and the song has begun again. There is something hauntingly delicate about the first return to land, especially when it is not a return in the physical sense, but one woven from the filaments of myth and presence, when you are not so much stepping into the world as you are re-entering it in a new frequency, like a radio signal tuned back into a channel that was always broadcasting, simply waiting for the right resonance. This is not the return of a body, for your bones remain somewhere beneath, fused with coral and barnacle and the shifting bones of long-dead whales. No, this is the return of remembrance of a song re-threaded into the fabric of waking life, disguised as wind, as whisper, as memory, rediscovered in the margins of everyday silence. The shoreline you choose is forgotten. Not abandoned, not ruined, just gently misplaced by time. A place too quiet for commerce, too steep for tourists, too inconvenient for settlement. The town is little more than a scattering of rooftops nestled between cliffs, its streets laid like worn thread through a landscape that has never entirely agreed to be tamed. Ivy coils through the frames of empty windows. A single bell in a belfry, cracked long ago by a lightning strike, hangs mute but still present. There is no church anymore, only its skeleton weathered and washed in salt spray, its walls softened by lichen and its pews missing like teeth from an aging mouth. But something remains beneath the floorboards, something even the termites left untouched. An echo, a hum. You arrive in the early hours of morning, or what passes for morning here, when the sea mist lingers long after the sun has risen, and every shadow is diffused into a soft blur. The townspeople are still indoors, cocooned in quilts and routines. Only the sea is awake, lapping gently against the rocks with a rhythm that seems more deliberate now. The tide carries your presence forward like a secret. The waves do not crash. They speak. At the edge of the surf stands a girl, no older than 10 perhaps, but her eyes carry the weight of someone who has stared too long into the distance and found something there she cannot explain. Her boots are too big. Her coat is patched in 3 places. Her hands are stained with charcoal. She is drawing something in the sand with the tip of a stick, spirals mostly, some with teeth, some with lines radiating outward like sunbursts. She does not look up as you arrive. She does not flinch. She simply knows. You settle into the wind behind her, a presence too light to be seen, too steady to be mistaken. And though you do not speak, she hears you. Not in her ears, but in the part of the mind reserved for lullabies, for dreams, for the deep and unsayable truths carried in the hush between crashing waves. She sang to me, the girl says softly, still tracing. Last night, in my dream, she said I was made of salt. You do not answer. There is no need. She continues to draw. My mother doesn't believe in the old stories. She says they're just what poor people tell to make storms feel like fate. But my grandma used to say the sea remembers everything, even the things we lie about. You move closer, not physically, but emotionally. Your resonance threads into her breath. Her stick stills for a moment. Then she begins to hum. It is broken at first, halting. A tentative tune half recalled from a place she cannot name. But then it deepens, stabilizes, gains weight. It becomes the shape of something, an outline of a song once carved into the hull of a ship, now re-etched into a child's breath. She doesn't know she's crying until the salt reaches her lips. Behind her, the town begins to stir. Smoke rises from chimneys. Boots echo against cobblestone. Somewhere a door creaks open and slams shut, but none of it matters. Not yet. The girl hums louder now, her voice no longer hiding in the wind. She sings not for beauty or attention, but for connection. The way birds call to each other across valleys and whales map the ocean with mournful declarations of presence. Her voice is not perfect. It wavers, but it reaches, and the sea responds. The tide swells, not violently, not with the crash of storybook magic, but with intention, with awareness. Foam curls up around her boots. She doesn't move. Instead, she sings louder. You place your presence into the wave. You ride it forward, into the spiral she has drawn, and through that spiral into the memory of the world. What happens next is not visible. Not to those watching from their doorways, not to the fisherman mending his nets near the pier, not to the pastor who still opens the broken chapel once a week to recite verses into silence. What happens is quiet, private, intimate. The girl closes her eyes, and you begin to sing through her, not in possession, not in control, but in harmony. You let the melody shape her breath, let the rhythm guide her heart. And in that fragile moment, she becomes the first listener in this place in generations. She becomes the bridge. Far below, beneath the shale and bone and rusted anchors, something shifts. Not awakens remembers. The coastline changes, not its shape, not its cliffs or coves, but its meaning. From that day forward, the winds along this shore carry something new, or rather, something old newly noticed. The fishermen begin to whistle a tune they cannot name while casting their lines. Children draw spirals in the margins of their school books. A woman hanging laundry hums a chord she says she learned from her grandmother, though she cannot remember when. And at night, when the sea grows quiet and the air stills, if you press your ear to the earth, you can hear it, a low vibration, like the memory of a voice you once loved. You stay, not as a shadow, not as a ghost, as a frequency, a current, a keeper. You move through the town now, in subtler forms. The rattle of dry kelp against a fence, the glint of sunlight off wet stone, the peculiar way certain trees bend toward the sea, even when there's no wind. You are not always noticed. That is fine. The song is not meant to shout. It is meant to endure, and it does. One day, months or years or centuries later, time is irrelevant. Now the girl, grown tall and soft-spoken, walks to the edge of the water with her own daughter in hand. She hums a song neither of them can name. The child asks why the waves move in circles, why the sea feels like it's breathing. The woman smiles. There's a song in the water, she says. It's always been there. Sometimes we forget how to listen, and you are there in that breath, in that story, in that whisper. A note returned, a wound remembered, a silence undone. There are places in the world where silence holds a different weight, where it does not merely represent the absence of sound, but becomes a presence unto itself, ancient and sentient, like an entity that has spent centuries gathering the discarded voices of the living. It is in such places that the song you carry begins to take root in unexpected ways, not loudly, not all at once, but in the slow, persistent manner that moss grows over stone or lichen reclaims the forgotten lintels of ruined chapels. The old world does not resist the song. It never truly did. Rather, it has always been waiting, aching for its return. You find yourself drawn now to thresholds, to the quiet in-between spaces where the structures of men falter and the domain of the sea begins. You travel not as a form, but as an intention, an echo embedded in brine and time. You move through fog, through foam, through the narrow spaces between stories, seeking the cracks where memory leaks and the old rhythms might be restored. You are not alone in this labor. Others have returned as well. Keepers who, like you, have answered the deep call and now carry fragments of the ancient melody within their blood and breath. You feel them from afar, each humming their own verse of the greater song. One lingers near a salt-sunken village in the north, where the bones of drowned churches sleep beneath the shallows. Another coils through the estuaries of a forgotten delta, whispering lullabies to the reeds that have outlived the empires they once fed. A third hums beneath a lighthouse, long extinguished its stone, hollowed out by storm and shadow. Though your paths do not cross in the traditional sense, your presences resonate across distance, intersecting in the low frequencies of shared purpose. Each of you in your way is becoming a node, a living instrument of memory, strung like beads along the unseen cord that runs beneath the surface of the world. Together, you are not rebuilding anything, for nothing has been destroyed. Instead, you are reawakening that which was only ever dormant. There is a village you visit often now, not physically for the days of walking roads, and boarding ships are behind you, but spiritually, rhythmically. The village lies at the base of a cliff, surrounded on 3 sides by salt marsh, and on the 4th by the sea. It is small, no more than a cluster of rooftops and a church bell that tolls at odd hours. The villagers are not godless, but they are not devout in the usual sense either. Their rituals are older, drawn from marrow and tide, rather than parchment and pew. They still lay offerings at the tide line, carved shells, folded linen small bones wrapped in twine. No one remembers why, but no one forgets either. You come to them through dreams. At first, only the children notice reporting strange visions of whales that speak in riddles, or of ships made of light that sail the stars. Their drawings change. Spirals appear. Figures without eyes, but with listening mouths. Then the older ones begin to hear it too, not in sleep, but in waking the sound of water echoing in empty vessels, the hum that travels through driftwood, the unmistakable tune beneath the noise of the surf. No one says the word siren. No one dares. They do not think in terms of monsters, only in presence. One night a fisherman disappears. His boat returns empty, nets intact, tackle undisturbed. A single scallop shell etched with lines resembling teeth rests on the seat where he once sat. The village grieves, but quietly, solemnly, as though they understand that he has not been taken but claimed, not lost but called. You linger there for weeks, singing through the mist, weaving your melody into the wind that shakes their shutters. The village changes. Their eyes become more reflective, their movements more fluid. They begin to sing, not deliberately, not performatively, but as if rediscovering a language they once spoke in the womb. A grandmother hums to her kettle. A blacksmith taps in rhythm. A child counts spirals in the sky. And one morning, before the gulls return to the harbor, a stranger arrives. She walks barefoot, hair tangled with kelp, her dress too thin for the season. No one sees her enter. She simply appears seated by the well at the center of town, tracing concentric circles into the dust. When asked her name, she does not answer. When asked where she comes from, she points toward the water. But her eyes do not seek the horizon. They seek beneath. They take her in, feed her soup, offer her boots. She does not stay long. But when she departs, there is a spiral carved into the lintel above the church door, and no one speaks of removing it. You follow her, not to guide her, not to guard her, but to witness. She walks from village to village, town to town, always along the shore. Where she lingers, strange things occur. Forgotten songs are hummed again. Nets draw in more than fish. Old maps begin to smudge their lines, unwilling to define waters that refuse to obey. Some fear her. A few attempt to banish her. But none succeed. Her presence is not confrontational. It is revelatory. And in time, even her doubters begin to hear the song. You understand, watching her, that she is another you. Not a replica, not a descendant, but another vessel for the melody. She has not heard the exact same tune. She has become her own harmony, shaped by different currents, different sorrows, but the resonance is undeniable. The song has chosen her as it chose you, and as you drift behind her like a shadow of brine and breath, you see that her path is not random. She is following the fault lines, the cracks in the world. In one town, she climbs a clock tower and sings a single note into the bell. It rings for 3 days. In another, she kneels in a dried riverbed and hums until the ground trembles and releases a spring. She does not speak, but her song does, and you learn. Each act she performs, each quiet miracle, is not an assertion of power, but an invitation. She is not imposing the melody. She is reminding the world of its own rhythm, asking it to remember the lullabies buried under concrete, the hymns beneath the hum of engines. You begin to sing with her, not always, not overtly, but in threads. A boy asleep in a barn hears your voice and wakes with a sketch of a fish-faced woman inked across his pillow in blue chalk. A dog howls at the moon, and in its voice is a phrase last spoken by a sailor lost 4 generations ago. A mother braids her daughter's hair and hums a pattern that causes the girl to dream of shipwrecks made of glass. These are not accidents. They are rememberings, and you are no longer just a keeper. You are a messenger. You do not tell stories. You restore them. And through these restorations, something begins to shift, not in the ocean, but in the land. The earth begins to flex, not visibly, not cataclysmically, but beneath the feet of men who have stopped listening. Fault lines begin to hum. Trees lean ever so slightly toward the sea. Stones warm when touched. Maps warp at their edges. Certain names long thought fictional begin to reappear on census rolls carved into trees, whispered between passing children. One evening, beneath a blood-orange moon, you return to the original village. The girl, the first listener now grown, waits at the shoreline, her daughter beside her, and her daughter's daughter beside her still. You sing, they answer, and the sea is no longer silent. Somewhere far from the coastline, deep within a landlocked valley, ringed with pine-clad ridges and forgotten footpaths, there exists a village where the sea has never been seen, not even in the form of tributaries or salt-scented wind. The rivers here are narrow and indifferent. The lakes remain glacial, their waters still and sealed beneath layers of mist. The people are quiet, hard-working, and built of stone themselves, shaped by long winters and short determined harvests. To them, the sea is a rumor, a distant idea glimpsed in the brittle pages of old books, or perhaps overheard in the trailing conversations of wandering traders. The ocean has never reached them, and they have never sought it, and yet the song has begun to arrive. It does not roar into the village like a tempest. There is no thunder in its approach, no crashing of waves or tumult of wind. Instead, it enters subtly, folding itself into the edges of things, the sudden vibration, of a wooden door frame. During still nights, the peculiar behavior of dogs who refuse to approach certain wells, the way children begin to draw spirals into the frost that gathers on window panes each morning without knowing why. These occurrences do not alarm the villagers, at least not at first. They are used to small mysteries, milk curdling too quickly, candles extinguishing without draft, a name slipping the mind despite decades of acquaintance. But gradually a deeper pattern emerges. The blacksmith, a man of considerable girth and grayer years, begins to whistle a tune he cannot place while working the bellows. The melody, winding and mournful, causes the coals to flicker differently, more rhythmically, as if the flames themselves are trying to respond. He never sang before, not in public, not even at festival gatherings. Yet now he does so without thought. The baker's daughter, quiet and sullen since her mother's passing, begins to hum in her sleep, and neighbors who hear her through thin cottage walls wake with eyes full of tears they cannot explain. It is the seamstress who first dares to speak aloud what others only feel. Sitting in the communal square one windless afternoon, she remarks without preamble or humor that the village has become haunted by a voice that isn't angry. The others pause. Some chuckle nervously, but no one denies it. Even the elder who survived famine and fire and once walked 4 days on a shattered foot to fetch medicine for a dying child does not dismiss the comment. He simply nods slowly, as though something long buried has begun to rise within him, not dread, but a strange and aching familiarity. What they do not know, what they could not possibly understand, is that the voice haunting them is not foreign. It is not an invader. It is the echo of themselves, of their forgotten link to a world that once cradled their ancestors' cradles, and now sings to them not with the demand of correction, but with the invitation of remembrance. You come to them not in the form of thunder or omen, but in the folds of breath in the unseen frequency that curls in the space between heartbeat and hesitation. You have learned now how to enter places unannounced, how to reside in a lull, how to gather yourself not into body, but into resonance. You no longer pass through doors or gates. You seep into spaces through thresholds too small for shadow. You find the valley ripe, ready not in knowledge, but in hunger. Not hunger for food, but for the half-remembered comfort of something deeper than stone and smoke. They do not know they've been yearning, but they have. Their music, their myths, their very names. These are all remnants of the sea, distant though they may be. Every people carries a shoreline in their blood, even if it has dried into dust. Your presence manifests first in their wells. The water once still begins to ripple without touch. Children lower pails and find not merely water, but warmth, a sensation unfamiliar in this chill-cloaked place. Some claim they hear humming from the bottom of the shaft. Others insist they saw light flicker where no flame could survive. The mayor, skeptical but not stubborn, descends with a lantern one morning, determined to banish rumor with reason. He returns pale, silent, and damp, refusing to explain why his boots are covered in seaweed. The wells are only the beginning. Soon, the earth itself begins to respond. The stones used in hearths and foundations start to sweat salt, even in the absence of fire. Bread baked in stone ovens smells faintly of brine. Dreams grow stranger. The farmers report sleepwalking to the edges of their fields, waking to find their hands buried in soil, as though they had been planting something with no seed. At the village school, the children compose poems with imagery. None of them recall learning songs of distant storms of creatures who speak in tides of ships whose sails breathe like lungs. And then one morning a woman arrives. She is not a stranger in the sense that she is unfamiliar. Her face is not foreign. Her clothing is simple, suited to travel, patched and purposeful. But none of the villagers can say where she came from. There are no roads into the valley that do not pass through dense woodlands or rugged paths, none of which bear signs of recent travel. Still she walks with the ease of one returning to a familiar place, her feet certain even on loose gravel. She does not ask for shelter or food. She sits at the edge of the well and begins to sing. The song is soft, slow, unfurling like sea fog. It does not command attention, yet within moments the entire square has gone still. Every boot halts. Every voice quiets. The birds fall silent in the trees. The air holds its breath. She sings not in a language anyone knows, and yet each syllable tastes familiar like a lullaby once heard in infancy and long dismissed as imagination. The melody does not rise. It sinks descending into the bones, into the marrow, into the deep ear that hears not with flesh, but with memory. When she finishes, she opens her eyes and meets the gaze of the eldest among them. "We have always been part sea," she says, and her voice is more than voice. It is declaration. It is reclamation. No one questions her. No one challenges. She is given a room, a fire, a place at the table. Not because she demands it, because the village remembers her now, the way a body remembers breath. You remain close and visible, but ever present. Your song and hers merge, forming layers of harmony that drift through the pines and settle into the stones. Over the following weeks, the village changes, not dramatically, not violently, but unmistakably. New words enter their lexicon, terms once only whispered, now spoken with reverence. The spiral becomes a common motif, drawn in steam on window panes, carved into walking sticks, woven into embroidery. Their architecture begins to bend slightly toward curvature. They begin building not for function alone, but for resonance houses that hum in wind wells that echo deeper than their depth. Most importantly, they begin to sing together, not daily, not on command, but when it feels right. At harvest, during storms, while mending nets, though none of them fish. The act is no longer performance. It is communion, each note a strand of the web being rewoven between them and the deep. You know the work is far from over. There are more villages, more valleys, more cities where the sea has been paved over and forgotten. But for now this place breathes, and it breathes with you. Far from the soft-voweled village nestled within that alpine valley where wells sing and children hum without knowing why, the song journeys farther inland, threading itself through the veins of rivers that have long forgotten their path to the ocean. These rivers winding through stone and loam, through ancient floodplains, now lined with cobblestones, once carried more than water. They bore whispers, migrations, and the lifeblood of entire civilizations that for a time knew how to listen. Now they murmur beneath cities too loud to hear them, winding beneath train stations and sewer grates flowing beneath cathedrals, whose foundations were laid with prayers, but whose walls have grown deaf. You travel this way now, riding resonance through sediment and silence, weaving through culverts and aquifers, becoming not a force that strikes, but a breath that lingers. The city ahead is vast, stone-walled and steel-boned, a place where glass reflects more sky than soul, and streets beat with mechanical pulse. It is a marvel of construction, a testament to human will and vision. But within it lies a sadness so deeply buried that most of its inhabitants have forgotten it was ever there. It is not the sadness of war or loss or hunger, though these things have happened here. No, it is the ache of disconnection, the silence that forms when a song has gone too long unanswered, The people here are not unkind. They are simply occupied. Their days are filled with numbers, contracts, pixels, and screens. Their ears are full of devices. Their eyes, overstimulated, see only what is required. They have not forgotten the sea because they have rejected it. They have simply misplaced it, buried it beneath productivity and progress, convinced that the song was no more than superstition, a relic of a time when survival meant reading the tide and listening for the whale's breath at dawn. But the rivers still remember. You begin with the smallest one. It runs behind the oldest library, pressed into shadow by towers of concrete and buzzing neon. It is barely a creek now, little more than a silver line of water winding between discarded bicycles and shattered bottles. Few notice it. Fewer still kneel beside it. But the current persists, as does the memory held within its eddies. You drift into it, not bodily, not visibly, but in frequency. You press your resonance into the stone, the trickle, the rusting iron that lines the culvert walls, and slowly, gently, you begin to sing, not loudly, not all at once. Your voice enters like fog, seeping, curling, caressing the brittle reeds that have somehow continued to grow along the edge. The song hums against the graffiti, finds its way into cracks where roots still fight to breathe, and coils into the forgotten spaces of the library's basement, where humidity warps parchment and time leaves its fingerprints in mildew and fading ink. At first, the song goes unnoticed. A maintenance worker sweeping leaves from the parking lot pauses without knowing why. He stands for a moment, glancing toward the creek, then shrugs and returns to work. A young girl waiting for her father after school walks too close to the edge and nearly slips. But instead of falling, she stops, mesmerized by the patterns the water makes around a stone. A librarian shelving a donation of books finds an unmarked journal wedged between volumes. The pages are blank, but when she runs her hand across the paper, her fingers come away wet with salt. It begins. The dreams follow, first scattered and fragmented, images of ships adrift in starlight, of whales blinking with eyes full of words, of towers made of song crumbling into the sea. At first, no one speaks of them. The dreams are dismissed as stress, as coincidence, as indigestion. But soon, they become impossible to ignore. Coworkers mention them over lunch. Students sketch their symbols in notebooks. A street artist working beneath an overpass begins to cover an entire wall in spirals and waves painted in deep ochre and ocean blue. And then one morning, before the sun has crested the eastern horizon, the song breaches the surface. A choir forms in the city square. It is not planned. No invitations are sent. No rehearsal schedules are printed. People simply arrive, drawn by a compulsion they cannot name. Some bring instruments. Others bring nothing but their voices. They do not sing in harmony, not at first. They do not know the words, but they feel tuned. They sing not to impress, not to perform, but to release something that has been locked in their chests since before they knew how to speak. You are among them, not standing, not watching, but woven between the notes. Each voice adds a layer to your presence. Each verse builds a bridge. They do not know you are there, but they feel you. They are not alone. The city begins to shift, not with earthquakes or riots. The buildings do not crumble. The power lines do not spark. But something in the tone of the city softens. People pause more often at crosswalks, not in hesitation, but in reflection. The rhythm of footsteps changes. The tempo of car horns becomes less aggressive, more impatient in a human way. In the cafes, conversations turn inward. People speak of dreams, of water, of places they've never seen, but somehow miss. One day, a public official mid-speech, mid-sentence begins to cry, not out of fear or shame, but from the sudden, overwhelming memory of his mother's voice singing lullabies whose melodies he hasn't heard in 40 years. The cameras capture it. The clip spreads. But rather than mockery, it is met with quiet reverence. The people understand. They too have begun to remember. You push deeper into the archives, into the digital threads that lace the city's consciousness. You hum into code, whisper into files, sing into signals, and slowly, screens begin to change. Nothing obvious, just small flickers. A map glitches, and for a second the streets are overlaid with tidal currents. A train schedule replaces its background image with a swirling spiral. A voice assistant responds to a question with a riddle in verse. The people notice. They post. They share. But rather than panic, they are curious. They lean in, and you welcome them. Through signal, through breath, through dream, they begin to sing with more confidence now. Choirs form spontaneously, on rooftops, in parking garages, in subway stations where the acoustics carry every note like incense through stone. These songs are not coordinated, not directed. They emerge the way waves do, unpredictable in form, yet always familiar in motion. In every verse is a reaching, a remembering, a return, and beneath it all your song endures. It is no longer yours alone. It never truly was, but now it has found its voices, and it is growing stronger. There comes a time in every journey, especially those shaped not by the logic of maps, but by the rhythm of memory, when movement ceases to be about distance and begins instead to reflect something internal, something intimate and resonant. You are no longer following a path in the physical sense. You are not traversing valleys or cities, not crossing oceans or continents in any conventional manner. Rather, you have entered the part of the journey in which you are the path. Your very presence, your unfolding consciousness becomes the map upon which the song is drawn. It courses through you now, not as a borrowed hymn, not as something placed within you by another, but as an inheritance fully awakened, blooming along, every nerve rooted in every breath. It is in this state, part presence, part memory, part echo, that you reach the next place in need of remembering. It is not a village, not a city, not a cathedral or cliffside ruin. It is a place more elusive than any of those and far more fragile. It is not marked on charts or preserved in paintings. This is the domain of the solitary, the unseen, the nearly forgotten. You arrive in a single room. The walls are narrow, the ceiling low. It smells faintly of paper, of dust, of wool blankets left too long beneath beds. There is a bed here, small and neat, and a window that does not open. Beyond the glass lies a view of nothing remarkable. A patch of grass, a brick wall, the dull outline of an alley. But the one who lies in the bed, the one who breathes slowly with effort through parted lips, is the true destination. She is very old, older than most remember, older than anyone around her, certainly. Her fingers are curled, gnarled with time and tenderness, and her hair has receded so completely that her scalp shines like sea-polished stone. Her eyes, however, though clouded, are open. They do not track movement. They do not focus on light. And yet, they see. She does not speak. She hasn't for years. But inside her, something stirs. You approach not as a specter, not as a visitation, but as a note rejoining its chord. The air around her shifts subtly. The pattern of dust in the window light rearranges. Somewhere deep in the fibers of her blanket, a ripple begins, delicate and slow. Her breath deepens. The nurse outside her room, shuffling papers with weary efficiency, does not notice the change. No alarms sound. No monitors blare. but in the space between one breath and the next, a fragment of the song finds its way back into the woman's lungs. It does not emerge as speech. It cannot. The body is no longer designed for that, but her chest rises with a new rhythm, and a faint hum issues from her throat. It is barely audible, and yet it is everything. She remembers, not with clarity, not with image or narrative, but with sound. A single note held within her since the days when she was young and bold and used to sit on the docks of a fishing village, long since consumed by modernity. She had been a singer then, nothing famous, but beloved by those who heard her. Her voice was known to calm sailors, to hush storms, to coax tears from those who never admitted to sorrow. She did not know then why her songs had such power. She thought it was talent, perhaps, or simply timing, but it was neither. But it was resonance. She was, without knowing it, a keeper in waiting, a carrier of the melody born far from the sea, but claimed by it all the same. She stopped singing when her husband died. The grief took her voice, not physically, but in the way sorrow robs us of the parts of ourselves most prone to beauty. Years passed. Her silence became routine, then habit, then identity. But now she hums again, and her soul ripples. You sit with her, though not visibly. You become the breeze through the cracked window seal, the hum in the radiator pipe, the weight in the air that causes the nurse to pause in the hallway and place a hand over her heart, confused by the sudden ache blooming in her chest. You surround the old woman like a tide, lapping at the ankles of a long-abandoned dock. And then, though her lips do not move, she sings, not with sound, with presence. She begins to dream again. And in that dream, she is not old. She is standing at the edge of the world, a cliff crumbling into an endless sea. Her feet are bare. Her hair, long again, is tangled with wind. Before her lies not a sunset, not a horizon, but the glimmering suggestion of another shore, just visible beneath the surface. And there, standing waist-deep in the water, are figures, vague, luminous, humming the very song she had once silenced within herself. She does not hesitate. She walks into the water, and with each step, her hum grows louder, stronger, until it is indistinguishable from theirs. She reaches the figures. One of them is you. You hold out your hand. She takes it. And in that moment, though, her body lies quiet and unmoving in a quiet room under a dim light. She leaves, not in death, in return. The nurse finds her later, peaceful, still, hands folded over a chest that hours before had trembled with a hum that no one else heard. But the nurse, weeping quietly in the hallway, will hum that same tune for weeks afterward. She will not know why, only that it feels right, that it feels home. You drift onward. One soul returned, one note restored. The melody continues, and ahead, somewhere across the city, the first drops of rain fall not from clouds, but from sky that remembers how to listen. The rain begins not as a storm, but as a suggestion, a change in texture, a slight shimmer in the air that alters the way. Light refracts through windows and lingers on polished stone. It is not accompanied by thunder, nor heralded by the shifting of clouds. There is no warning, no ceremony. It arrives quietly, almost reverently, soaking into the world with the patience of something that has waited a very long time to be remembered. Each drop is heavy with meaning. Each carries the resonance of a memory too vast to be held by language. This is not weather. This is remembrance returning to a world that had for a time forgotten how to mourn gently. You ride within it, not like a ghost, nor a spirit sent to haunt. You move more like gravity, like a slow pressure settling into the bones of buildings and the curvature of old roads. You do not choose a direction for the song you carry, does not follow a route in the traditional sense. It does not adhere to the logic of maps or grids or latitude. It follows need, humming beneath sidewalks and scaffolding, seeking out the fractures in hearts, the long unspoken griefs tucked between the hours of a workday, the lonely dinners eaten in silence, the secrets that weigh down the beds of people who no longer believe in their own voices. The song finds those places, and so do you. The city absorbs the rain like an old letter pressed to a damp window ink, running slightly paper, softening under the weight of old words returning. No floods rise, no drains clog, and yet the presence of water changes everything. Strangers begin to look up. People who moments before moved only with urgency now stand in place, faces tilted skyward, feeling something within the rain that is not mere wetness, something that settles on the skin with a familiarity they cannot explain. It begins in the cracks, between cobblestones and the darkened joints where roots push up through asphalt puddles form, and in those puddles reflections appear that do not match the sky. No one notices at first. It's subtle, a figure passing too slowly, a wave curling from the wrong direction, a star reflected in midday. But the children see it. They always do. One crouches, her palm pressed against the puddle's edge, whispering a song she doesn't know she knows. Her father, distracted by a phone call, doesn't see her eyes widen, doesn't hear her whisper. It's like the seas looking back. The reflections spread, not maliciously, not even disruptively. They simply return. Slowly, steadily, they reclaim space once yielded to forgetfulness. In the mirrored surface of glass doors, people see not themselves, but images that ripple with stories, snippets of boats that no longer sail of islands, that exist only in song of faces half submerged, watching with quiet patience. The images are not hallucinations, they are not dreams, they are invitations, and the city begins to respond. It starts with the smallest acts. A florist leaves bowls of water outside her shop, placing a single shell in each, as though offering tribute. She does not know why she does it, only that her hands move with certainty, and that customers linger longer when the shells are near. A man on the subway begins carrying a tuning fork, striking it against the railing before disembarking. The note it releases is barely audible, but every dog on the platform turns its head in the same direction. A group of high school students, unsupervised and unapologetic, paint spirals onto the underside of an abandoned overpass. 87 spirals, one for every whispered rumor they heard in their dreams last week. You are present for all of this. You do not intervene. You do not instruct. You accompany. You resonate. You linger in the cadence of a footfall, in the swell of breath, before someone decides to hum. You ripple through the fibers of a woven rug that belonged to a sailor's widow, through the iron seams of a ship preserved as a museum exhibit, through the pressure in the chest of a street violinist who begins to weep mid-performance for reasons he cannot name. And then one day a door opens. It is not a metaphor, a literal door in the oldest part of the city, long sealed with rust and policy, groans on its hinges and swings inward. Behind it lies a stairwell, winding and narrow, descending into a cellar no one recalls constructing. Yet the air that rises from it smells unmistakably of salt. Not sewage, not mold. Salt. The first to enter is a child. She is not alone, though no adult accompanies her. The song walks with her threads into her every movement. She does not speak, does not falter. She walks as though she's been here before, as though she remembers. At the bottom of the stairwell she finds a pool, still, deep, framed in brick and stone, a place once used to hold water for industrial purpose, now repurposed by time and silence into a kind of sanctuary. She kneels, she hums, and the pool answers. It does not shimmer, it does not boil, it sings. A vibration rises, not loud, not forceful, but immense. It fills the chamber like candlelight in a long-forgotten shrine. The girl does not flinch. She smiles. And above her, in the city that had forgotten how to kneel, windows begin to tremble. Not with fear, with resonance. The people hear it, not all at once, not in full understanding, but enough to pause mid-stride, enough to lower their voices on crowded streets, enough to realize that something is returning not to threaten but to reconcile. And on rooftops, in stairwells, in parks, and laundromats, and waiting rooms, they begin to sing back, one by one, not in unison, not in pitch, but in intention. Each voice carries a fragment, a name half remembered, a verse passed down, a melody once believed lost to childhood. You gather them, not in a vessel, not in a songbook, but in yourself. You are the archive now, the ocean's memory walking still. And as the city exhales, as its breath aligns once more with the ancient pulse of tides and trench, you understand. The song was never about restoring the past. It was never about rewriting history. It was always about reminding the present that it belonged to the sea, to memory, to each other, and to you. The city does not change overnight. No transformation of any real worth ever does. But something within its pulse begins to slow, to steady, to sync with an older rhythm. And it is from this gradual, nearly imperceptible shift that true restoration begins. No one calls it a miracle. There are no headlines proclaiming the arrival of an ancient melody, no televised interviews with the girl who sang to the hidden pool, no street parades or civic awards. In fact, much of what happens passes beneath the notice of most. But not all. In the weeks following the first hum from beneath the cellar, more doorways begin to open. These are not grand doors, no ornate hinges or stained glass, or steps worn smooth by centuries of pilgrimage. They are maintenance doors, utility hatches, forgotten access points behind water heaters and beneath stairwells. Places long thought to lead nowhere. Places avoided for no reason anyone could explain. One by one, they are found again, not by engineers or city officials, but by those whose feet drift toward silence, whose hands brush aside cobwebs, as if by instinct. Behind each door there is water, sometimes a trickle, sometimes a still basin. Occasionally, a cavernous reservoir, echoing with the weight of time. In every case, the air is heavy with brine, and the silence is not empty, but full of stories of memory, of song, waiting for breath. Those who find these places do not report them. They sit, they listen, and eventually they sing, not always aloud, not always consciously, but the moment they step away, the song goes with them. It rides beneath their fingernails and behind their teeth. It hums in their footsteps, coils into the wind, stirred by the swinging of their coats. Their presence begins to change the people around them. Conversations grow slower, deeper. Touch lingers. Laughter takes on a different pitch, less nervous, more full. In cafes and corner stores, people start making eye contact again. Not always, but enough. You feel this shift in every fiber of your being. Not because you are measuring it. There is no scoreboard, no threshold to be crossed, but because it begins to resonate with the parts of you that were once dormant. The places in your essence that once felt hollow, shaped like longing, shaped like departure, are now being filled. Not with answers, not with finality, but with presence, with return. You no longer roam, not in the way you once did. Where once your journey followed, need followed, fracture followed the pull of sorrow like a needle toward a bruise. Now it follows song. You move not as a seeker, but as a listener, guided not by pain, but by harmony. Your steps now echo the rhythm of places that are healing, not places that are broken. You return at last to the edge of the water, not the city's water, the first water, The shore where your memory was first stirred, where the cage once stood in the darkness below deck, where her song first pierced the silence between heartbeat and fear. The midnight sparrow is gone. No wreckage remains. No drifting plank. No figurehead adrift in tide. But the sea remembers, and you standing barefoot in the shifting foam remember with it. The tide wraps around your ankles like a welcome. The horizon before you is flat but full, its stillness broken only by the occasional breach of a fin or the distant silhouette of something gliding just below the surface. You know without question that below that vast and mirrored skin, the cathedral still hums. The keepers still gather. The stone still glows with memory and promise. But you are not meant to return to it. Not yet. Your place is here, on the seam between world and water. You kneel. The sand gives beneath your knees, as though remembering the weight of who you were. The wind presses against your back, not cold, but persistent, as if nudging you towards something you already know. And then she comes, not walking, not swimming. She rises not from the depths, but from the space between. She is not as she was when first you saw her. Then she was caged, pale, bound in salt-drenched ropes. Now she is formless in form, a shape made of memory and motion, her hair trailing behind her, not as strands, but as rivers, her eyes no longer black pits of silence, but radiant wells of song. She does not speak, she sings, and every note is a question. Have you listened? Have you remembered? Have you become the song? And you answer, not with words, with presence, with stillness, with breath. You sing not aloud, not in melody, but in the way your chest rises in time with hers, in the way your heart no longer races in fear, but beats in sync, in the way your thoughts no longer scatter like gulls startled from a dock, but settle one by one, like anchors finding seabed. She touches your forehead. It is not a blessing, it is a naming, and you understand. You are no longer simply a keeper. You are no longer merely a messenger. You are the verse, the bridge between stories, the tide that carries song from the deep to the shore. You are the living hymn of all that was drowned, all that was lost, all that is now rising again. She fades not into absence, but into you. And you rise not as yourself, but as us. And somewhere in 100 villages, in 1,000 dreams, in 10,000 songs hummed softly at the edge of sleep, the world begins to remember, and the sea begins to breathe. And now, as the journey comes to its natural pause, not an end, but a soft tapering of breath, you find yourself resting within a kind of stillness that feels earned, not imposed. It is not the silence of emptiness or absence, nor the dull hush that follows grief or exhaustion. Rather, it is the quiet of completion, the deep humming peace that follows when something vast has finally spoken its last note for the evening, and the echoes have settled into place like dust in the slanted light of late afternoon. You are no longer standing, nor walking, nor even listening in the way you once did. Now you are inhabiting. You are inside the song, and the song is inside of you. The boundaries between sea and skin, between voice and memory, between past and becoming, they no longer matter. What matters is the resonance, the subtle but unbreakable thread that ties every remembered name, every returned breath, every salt-washed sorrow together into a single enduring melody. Around you, the world does not change drastically. The cities remain, the roads wind, the tide continues its faithful rhythm. But within these constants, something sacred has been restored, a willingness to remember, to hear, to feel. People begin to hum again sometimes without knowing why. Children draw spirals in sand they've never seen. Eyes turn to the sea, not with fear or indifference, but with a soft curiosity, as if seeking a long-lost friend they once knew by another name. And in the quiet, the deep remembers them too. So now, As the night begins to settle, like velvet across the waters, you let yourself drift not away, but within. And the last thing you hear before dreams rise to meet you is the song, breathing through the tide, carrying you home.